I was scraping the last bits of dinner onto my plate, the kind of quiet meal you get used to when the house has grown too empty. The television murmured in the background, a voice I barely heard anymore. My phone buzzed, and when I answered, I thought it was just another check-in from my daughter. She spoke with that warm tone I always fell for, asking about my health, if I was eating enough, reminding me about the grocery app she had installed on my phone. I told her I was fine, I always did. When she said goodbye, I was ready to hang up, but she forgot to end the call. The line stayed open. At first I heard only the shuffle of her purse and the faint hum of an airport terminal. Then I heard Jeremy, her husband. His voice was sharp, calculating. "It is time, Caitlin. He cannot stay in that house forever. He is a burden." My daughter's reply came cold, stripped of the affection she had shown seconds earlier. She spoke of me like an obstacle. She spoke of selling the house, my house, the one I built board by board with my own hands. She spoke of moving me into a nursing home so they could cash out and buy their dream place in Boulder. My fingers went cold around the receiver. My chest felt hollow. For a moment I thought I had misheard. But then came the laugh, hers, the same laugh that once lit up Christmas mornings, now hollow, cruel. I set the phone down and stared at the photograph on the mantel. My wife Ellen smiled back, frozen in time, as if asking me what I planned to do. That was when I whispered to myself the promise that changed everything. I am not dead yet, and I am not losing my mind. From this moment on, I will be the one telling the story. I sat in the silence of my living room, the phone still lying on the table where it had slipped from my hand. For a long while I did not move, as though stillness might undo what I had just heard. My daughter's voice, cool and practiced, replayed in my mind, twisted with Jeremy's hard-edged certainty. A burden, that was what they called me. A burden, not a father. A financial calculation, not a man. I told myself I might have misheard. Maybe the phone connection was bad. Maybe they were talking about someone else. My heart wanted to believe in the daughter I had raised, not the one I had just overheard. So I did what I had always done in my life as an engineer, a builder, and a father. I went back to the evidence. I replayed the voicemail function on my landline. The call had remained open just long enough for the machine to pick it up, capturing pieces of their voices like shards of broken glass. The audio was fragmented, uneven. But enough. Caitlin's voice cut clear. "He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down?" Then Jeremy, calm and businesslike, "The house is worth nearly $1 million now. We could sell it and put him somewhere decent, not too expensive." Each word hit harder than the last. The warmth I had felt earlier that evening when she called me Dad with concern and asked about my dinner now felt like the mask of a stranger. I played the recording again and again. Sitting in the chair where Ellen used to read every night, I pressed the buttons so often I could have done it blindfolded. I wrote down the fragments on a pad of paper, underlining the words nursing home and burden until the pen nearly tore through the page. But part of me still fought against it. I thought maybe I misunderstood the tone. Maybe they were worried for my safety. Perhaps the talk of selling the house was speculation, not intent. So I turned to the one thing I knew could not lie, their schedules. Caitlin had said she was at a conference in Phoenix ending Friday. I pulled out the calendar she had given me last Christmas, the one with family photos printed on each month. Her notes were scrawled in her neat handwriting. Phoenix Conference, Digital Marketing, March 14-18. The dates matched exactly. I checked the time stamps on the phone call. It was evening, just after dinner. When they would have been between meetings, exactly as she said. Their alibis fit too neatly. The story she had told me on the phone matched the background noise I had heard afterward. It was undeniable. I pulled out the yellow legal pad Ellen had once used for grocery lists and started writing down every instance that suddenly seemed suspicious. The night they asked me for help with Jeremy's car repair and promised to pay me back. The month they stayed in the house without rent, using my electricity, my food, my time. The way Caitlin's tone shifted whenever she mentioned the property values in Denver. At the time I had dismissed it as casual chatter, but now I saw it for what it was, groundwork. I turned the pages of my notes slowly, piecing together their plan like I used to piece together construction drawings. First the foundation, then the framework, then the finishing touches. Caitlin had been laying a foundation of false concern, Jeremy providing the framework of cold practicality. And together they were building a future on the ruins of my life. The doubt drained away as steadily as the ink dried on the paper. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not the paranoia of an old man left too long with his memories. It was a deliberate plan spoken with laughter and calculation while I sat in the very house they had already started to count as their inheritance. I pushed back from the table and walked to the mantel. Ellen's photograph stared back at me. Her smile tender, her eyes steady. She had warned me once, not with words, but with the way she looked at our daughter when Caitlin demanded more than we could give. Do not let her forget gratitude, Ellen had whispered in the dark when we were young parents, exhausted but determined. Tonight, standing before her picture, I knew Ellen had been right. I took a deep breath. The first wave of pain had been like a knife to the chest, but now it was duller, harder, almost metallic. The engineer in me had shifted gears. I was no longer a grieving father questioning whether he had misheard. I was a man reviewing evidence, cross-checking facts, and confirming what was real. The truth was clear. My daughter and her husband were not protecting me. They were planning to erase me. And now that I knew with certainty, I also knew what had to come next. I pulled the storage box from the back of the closet and set it on the table with a heavy thud. The cardboard sagged at the corners, worn soft from years of handling. Inside was the story of my life told in paper and ink, a record I had kept more out of habit than need. Ellen used to tease me about never throwing anything away, but now every page looked like a witness prepared to testify. The first pile I drew out was tuition statements. University of Colorado, year after year, thousands upon thousands of dollars. I remembered the long nights, the double shifts. The taste of dust and sweat as I came home too tired to even eat. Each figure on the page carried the memory of a missed dinner with Ellen, of hours stolen from my own health so that Caitlin could have a chance at a better life. I traced the ink with my finger and thought of the promise I had made back then. She deserves more than we had. I had kept that promise, but somewhere along the way she had forgotten it was ever made. Beneath those letters lay receipts from her wedding. Elegant script announcing ballrooms, floral arrangements, musicians. $32,000 that had drained not just my wallet, but my body. I had worked 6 months of weekends for a contractor friend, hauling lumber and nailing floorboards, just to cover the cost of one day that she insisted would define her happiness. I remembered her tears when I first said we could not afford it, and my own words when I gave in, we will find a way. She had hugged me and whispered I was the best father in the world. Now those words lay flat on paper, empty when measured against what came after. Next came Jeremy's debts. Bank statements, transfer slips, notes scrawled with amounts I covered when his car broke down or when he was between jobs. $3,000 for the BMW's transmission, another $1,000 for rent when they claimed they were short. I had paid without complaint, telling myself this was what family did. Jeremy had thanked me, had even called me a second father once, and I believed him. Reading those numbers now, I felt how hollow those words had been. Underneath the bills were photographs, me on a ladder, hammer in hand, Ellen beside me holding a tray of lemonade for the crew, the skeletal frame of the house rising in the background, a dream we built nail by nail. I found pictures of the oak floors laid by my own hands, the grains still shining with polish. I saw the bay window, Ellen's favorite spot, the one I had measured and cut late into the night because she wanted sunlight pouring into our afternoons. These images were proof that the house was more than property. It was our story written in wood and stone, and finally the deed itself. Roy and Ellen Hayes, 1999, my name alone now since the cancer took her, paid in full, clear title, no lien, no cosigner, no one else's claim. I held the document in my hands and felt its weight settle deeper than anything else. This was not a future inheritance for Caitlin and Jeremy to spend. This was the monument of my life's work. I spread the papers across the table in neat stacks. Tuition, wedding, bailouts, construction, deed. Each pile told a chapter, and together they formed a verdict. I had given again and again, and they had taken until giving became expectation. Looking at it all together, the conclusion was unavoidable. My generosity had become their entitlement. The anger I felt the night before cooled into something firmer, sharper. These were not mementos anymore. They were exhibits in a trial where I was both judge and witness. The evidence was irrefutable. My daughter and her husband were planning to erase me from the very house I had built, forgetting every sacrifice that made their lives possible. I closed the folder carefully and set it aside. My decision was forming, steady as poured concrete. The house was mine, the choice was mine, and from this moment forward, every step would be built on that foundation of truth. The morning after I sorted the papers, I woke with a heaviness that coffee could not cut through. The house was too quiet, too still, as if even the walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what I would do next. I had the evidence, the receipts, the photographs, the deed, but evidence meant little unless I knew what power it gave me. Ellen's voice echoed in my head from years ago when she first grew sick. "Promise me you will protect yourself, Roy. Do not let them take advantage." That memory pushed me to reach for the old business card tucked in my desk drawer. The card was slightly yellowed around the edges, but the name was still clear: Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. We had met him once back when Ellen insisted we set our affairs in order. I had forgotten about that meeting until now. I dialed the number with hands that felt steadier than I expected. When Todd answered, his voice carried the kind of calm you want from a man who has seen families at their worst. "Mr. Hayes, good to hear from you. How can I help?" I told him I needed to discuss something about my daughter and son-in-law. His pause said he had heard this story before, though never mine. Sitting in his office later that day, I felt like a man stepping into court. His shelves were lined with heavy law books, their spines worn from years of use. Family photos dotted the desk: a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever. He asked me to start from the beginning, and I did. I told him about the overheard call, about the word burden, about their plan to sell my house. Todd listened without interruption, his pen scratching notes across a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back, his expression steady. "Mr. Hayes, this situation is more common than you think. Adult children often feel they know what is best for aging parents, especially when valuable property is involved. But let me be clear, they cannot force you to do anything." I felt a weight lift slightly, though the anger beneath it still smoldered. "Are you certain? The house, the deed?" "Lovett," he nodded. "The title is in your name only. Since your wife passed, it belongs solely to you. They cannot sell it, cannot sign papers, cannot move you without your consent. It is your property, your decision." Those words settled over me like armor. My property, my decision. For the first time since that call, I felt the ground under my feet again. I asked him what would happen if I wanted to sell it myself. He smiled faintly. "Then you could, tomorrow if you chose. The market is strong. With the right buyer, a sale could close within a week." I sat there in silence, the thought turning over in my mind. My daughter had been plotting to take what she assumed was hers, and here I was being told I held all the power. Todd studied me for a moment, as if weighing whether to press further. "Mr. Hayes," he said finally, "I can help you, but you need to decide if you are ready for such a step." I left his office with more than just information. I left with a kind of clarity I had not felt in years. The anger no longer burned wild, it had direction. Walking to my truck, I noticed the way the sun hit the sidewalk, sharp and bright, as though even the day itself demanded I see things clearly. At home, I laid Todd's card beside the deed on my desk. 2 simple pieces of paper, yet together they drew a line between helplessness and control. For years I had thought of myself as the provider, the caretaker, the man who made sure everyone else had what they needed. But now I understood the law stood behind me, not them. The house was not Caitlin's, it was not Jeremy's, it was mine, and now I knew beyond any doubt that I had the right to decide its future. When I got home from Todd Fisher's office, I placed his business card on the desk beside the deed and sat staring at both as if they were a set of blueprints. In my old line of work, no structure ever rose without a plan. You measured twice, cut once, and trusted nothing to chance. That habit had saved me more than once on job sites, and now it would save me in my own house. If Caitlin and Jeremy believed I was a helpless old man waiting to be managed, they were about to learn that I still knew how to build something solid. This time, what I would build was not a home, but a plan to leave them with nothing. I took out a fresh legal pad and drew a line down the middle. On the left, I wrote tasks. On the right, I wrote deadlines. The word countdown hung in my mind like the tick of a clock. They would be back from Phoenix in less than 2 weeks. That gave me 7 to 10 days to change the course of everything. The first task was obvious: find an agent who specialized in quick cash sales. I could not risk a traditional listing that might stretch on for months. I searched names online, noting success rates, client reviews, and average closing times. One name appeared again and again. A man who boasted cash buyers on standby. I circled his number. Step 1. Next came the matter of the title and closing. Todd had assured me it could be done quickly, but I knew paperwork could drown a man if he was not prepared. I wrote down, gather documents, verify clear title, provide deed. I opened the drawer where Ellen used to store everything important. The deed, tax records, insurance, everything was there. She had always been meticulous. And in this moment her carefulness felt like a guiding hand. Step 2. Then there was the money. I would need a safe account, one my daughter could never touch. I wrote, open new bank account, wire funds immediately after closing. The figure of $890,000 echoed in my head, not as a prize, but as protection. With that money, I could carve out a future on my own terms. Step 3. Housing was another consideration. I would not be homeless. I thought of small apartments, senior communities, places quiet and private. I could not stay in the house once the sale closed, and I did not intend to. I wrote, research furnished rentals, prepare deposit, move essentials. I imagined Ellen's jewelry box, the wedding photos, my certificates. Those would go with me. The rest could stay. Step 4. Security mattered as well. If Caitlin and Jeremy returned before the sale finalized, they might pressure me, even intimidate me. I scribbled, change locks, consult locksmith if necessary. I underlined it twice. They had underestimated me once. They would not get the chance again. Step 5. Finally, I considered the message. What would they find when they came back expecting to take control? Not me, not my compliance, not their dream house. They would find an empty shell and the truth in my handwriting. I wrote, prepare note, explain betrayal, confirm sale. The thought of it steadied me. Step 6. When I set the pen down, the list stared back at me with ruthless clarity. 6 steps, 7 to 10 days. A lifetime of being generous had taught me patience, but now patience was the enemy. Speed and precision would be my allies. That night, I pulled a calendar from the wall and marked each day with red ink. Day 1, call agent. Day 2, meet buyer. Day 3, inspection. Day 4, finalize contracts. Day 5, prepare bank transfer. Day 6, secure new housing. Day 7, lock changes and final preparations. By the time Caitlin and Jeremy returned from their trip, everything would be done. I sat back and listened to the grandfather clock tick from the hallway. Each swing of its pendulum felt like a hammer striking steel. The countdown had begun. 3 days after Brian first walked through my front door, I sat in a polished conference room at the title office, pen in hand. The contracts lay before me, every line reviewed with the same care I once gave to blueprints. Sale price, $890,000. Buyer, cash investor group. Closing, 10 business days. I initialed where told, signed my name with steady strokes, and felt the chains loosen link by link. When the notary slid the confirmation across the table, I saw the number in black and white. $890,000 deposited directly into my new account. More money than I had ever imagined holding, yet in that moment it was not about wealth, it was about independence. The funds meant I would never again have to wonder what Caitlin and Jeremy planned for me. My future was no longer in their hands. Driving home, the weight of 25 years seemed to lift off my shoulders. The same streets I had driven 1,000 times looked different, less like a path into routine and more like a road into possibility. I pulled into the driveway and looked at the house as though it already belonged to someone else. The windows shone in the afternoon light. Silent witnesses to the truth I now carried. Inside, I moved with purpose. I opened closets and drawers not to clean but to choose. Essentials only, I told myself. Ellen's jewelry box, the wedding albums, the deed now irrelevant but still a reminder. My certificates from the years when I still built for a living. Her favorite cookbook, pages stained with sauces and notes in her handwriting. I set each item carefully into a suitcase, building a smaller, truer version of my life. The rest I left untouched. The furniture, the china cabinet, the trophies, they belonged to the story of a family that no longer existed. Let the new owners write their own chapter on the stage. I had mine already. That evening I sat in the living room with only a lamp burning and dialed a local apartment complex I had researched. A furnished one-bedroom month to month. Yes, available. Yes, move in this week. I placed the deposit with a cashier's check the next morning, cash drawn directly from the new account. No paper trail my daughter could trace, no access she could ever demand. Then came security. I called a locksmith, explaining I needed immediate changes to all the locks. He arrived with a toolbox and quiet efficiency. Watching him remove the brass handles Ellen had chosen 15 years earlier was harder than I expected, but I reminded myself why. These were not just locks, they were barriers against betrayal. The new silver hardware clicked into place with a sharper sound, modern, unyielding. By the end of the week, the plan was complete. The money sat safe. The apartment keys lay in my pocket. My suitcase was packed with only what mattered. The house stood as beautiful as ever, but it no longer belonged to me, not in spirit and soon not in law. And through it all, I said nothing. Caitlin called twice. Her number flashing on the screen, I let it ring, let her stew. For once, I held the silence, and the silence felt like power. That night, I sat at the kitchen table one last time, Ellen's photo beside me. I whispered aloud, the money is safe, the house is sold, they will come home to nothing, and for the first time in years, I smiled without guilt. The house was nearly silent the night I sat down to write the letter. The pen felt heavy in my hand, heavier than any hammer I had swung, heavier than the beams I once carried up ladders. This would not be just ink on paper. This would be my voice when I was no longer here to speak inside these walls. The first draft came out raw, bitter, and sharp. Anger spilled across the page, words of betrayal and cruelty. I read it back and felt it sounded like the rant of a wounded old man. That was not what I wanted. I did not need to scream. I needed to leave a message they could never forget. The second draft was colder, stripped of emotion, almost businesslike. I laid out facts, dates, numbers. But that too felt wrong. Facts alone could not convey the weight of what they had done. I wanted them to feel my silence, my disappointment, my resolve. On the third draft, my hand steadied. I wrote carefully, the way Ellen once admired when I would sign birthday cards in my neat engineer's script. Dear Caitlin and Jeremy, if you are reading this, it means my plan worked. I heard your phone call. I heard you call me a burden. I heard you discuss selling the house I built with your mother, the house where you grew up. The house has been sold, $890,000. The money is secure in my new account where you will never touch it. Your belongings have been packed and placed in storage. You have 30 days to claim them. After that, the responsibility is yours. I gave you everything I had, my years, my health, my money, my love, and you repaid me with calculation and deceit. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. I set the pen down, reading it again slowly. It was not rage that I felt now. It was a calm finality. The kind of calm that comes when you know you have done all you can and the rest no longer belongs to you. The next morning, I folded the letter and placed it in a white envelope. On the front, in the same steady hand, I wrote their names, not my daughter or my son-in-law, just Caitlin and Jeremy. They had chosen the distance themselves. When the house grew quiet that afternoon, I walked to the front door and taped the envelope at eye level. The tape stuck firmly and I pressed it flat with my palm. The paper looked small against the wooden frame I had once carved, but its weight filled the room. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. This was my voice distilled, my refusal, my justice. No raised tone, no slammed fists, only the truth in black ink. I imagined the look on Caitlin's face when she read it. Imagined Jeremy's jaw tightening, his mask of confidence cracking. The letter would speak for me louder than I ever could. It would echo in their minds long after the house belonged to strangers. I turned away from the door and walked through the rooms one more time. The letter waited, silent and certain, ready to deliver what I no longer needed to say. The idea came to me as I sat alone in the apartment, the new lease agreement folded neatly in a drawer. Selling the house and leaving the letter were enough to end their schemes. But a part of me wanted more. I wanted to see the moment when the facade cracked, when their voices shifted from confidence to panic. I did not need to be in the room, but I needed to witness it, to be sure the lesson struck where it belonged. I opened my laptop and typed mini surveillance cameras into the search bar. The screen filled with devices so small they could vanish in plain sight, smoke detectors, alarm clocks, phone chargers. One caught my eye, a charger with a hidden lens streaming directly to my phone. Simple, discreet, perfect. I paid extra for overnight delivery. For $149, I would have my witness. When the package arrived the next day, I tested it in the apartment first. The picture was crisp, the audio sharp. I walked in and out of frame, watching myself appear on the small screen of my phone. It worked flawlessly. I packed it in my bag and drove back to the house for what I knew might be the final time. I parked in the garage to avoid questions from neighbors, stepping into the home I no longer owned. The air still smelled of lemon oil and faint lavender, Ellen's touches lingering in the wood and fabric. For a moment I nearly faltered. but then I pictured Caitlin's voice saying he is a burden, and my resolve tightened. At the front entryway, I plugged the device into an outlet by the door. The angle was perfect. It captured the lock, the threshold, the very spot where my envelope waited. On my phone, I could see the entire frame, ready to record every expression when they arrived. I tested the motion detection twice, stepping out and back in. The screen lit up with the alert, movement detected. It was ready. Before leaving, I adjusted the envelope one last time. I imagined Caitlin's fingers trembling as she tore it open, Jeremy reading over her shoulder, both of them realizing that the man they dismissed as weak had outplayed them completely. I stood there in the stillness, Ellen's photo already packed in my suitcase, and whispered, "This will be justice. You will be here when they read it." Locking the door behind me with the new silver keys, I walked back to the car, opened the app on my phone, and saw the empty entryway staring back at me. Silent, waiting. Back at the apartment, I placed the phone on the table like a television remote, only this time the show would not be fiction. It would be truth. Every lie, every scheme, every plan they whispered would collapse at that doorway, and I would be the only audience. The thought brought me a calm I had not felt in years. The house was gone, the money secured, the locks changed. But now justice had eyes, and those eyes were mine. Friday afternoon, the alert came. My phone buzzed against the table with the message I had been waiting for, motion detected. I picked it up, opened the feed, and there they were. Jeremy's black SUV pulled into the driveway with the same confidence I had once mistaken for stability. Caitlin stepped out first, brushing her hair back, smiling as though she already owned the place. They carried themselves like victors returning from battle, unaware the war had already ended. I watched Caitlin reach into her purse, pulling out the familiar ring of brass keys. She walked up the steps and slid one into the lock. It did not turn. She frowned, tried again, jiggled the handle. I could almost hear the metal scrape uselessly inside the new mechanism. Her lips moved in irritation. That is strange. Jeremy came closer, his face tightening as he examined the door. "Let me try the back." He disappeared from frame while Caitlin kept pushing at the lock, her frustration mounting. Moments later he returned, his jaw set. "Back door is locked too. The garage remote does not work either. These locks are brand new." On the screen I saw Caitlin's hand tremble as she dialed the house phone. I knew it would ring into emptiness. No line, no voicemail, just silence. She tried again, this time my cell, but she had no number to call. She had never cared enough to insist I get one. She looked at Jeremy, panic flickering. He shook his head, his mask of confidence starting to slip. Then came the window. Jeremy boosted her up like a burglar breaking into a stranger's home. I watched her skirt catch on the frame as she climbed inside, graceless and desperate. Seconds later, the front door opened from within. Jeremy dragged their suitcases over the threshold, and then both of them froze. The envelope. White against the wood, their names written in the careful script I had chosen. Caitlin pulled it down with shaking fingers, tearing it open. Her eyes scanned the words, and I saw her expression collapse, confusion to shock, shock to horror. "He sold the house," she cried out, her voice high and sharp. "He sold it." Jeremy snatched the paper, reading as though the sentences might rearrange into something kinder. His face darkened. That manipulative old bastard, he played us. Caitlin's tears smeared her makeup as she shook her head. The money was supposed to be ours, our future. Jeremy snapped back, his future was never ours to take. We should have handled this differently. Their voices rose, tangled in accusation and blame, on my screen. I watched them unravel in the living room I had once built with love. They hurled words at each other, words I had never imagined hearing between them. "You pushed for the nursing home. You laughed about him behind his back. You never stood up for him. You ruined this." I sat back in my chair, the phone warm in my hand. This was the justice I had built for myself, not loud, not violent, but absolute. They had come home expecting gratitude and compliance. What they found instead was a locked door, a letter, and the truth staring at them like a mirror. I ended the feed. I had seen enough. I closed the camera feed and set the phone down on the table. The apartment around me was small, plain, almost sterile compared to the home I had built, yet in that moment it felt larger than any mansion, because this place was mine, chosen by me, unburdened by the weight of manipulation. For the first time since Ellen's death, I breathed without the ache of someone waiting to take from me. I poured a glass of the wine Ellen and I had been saving for an anniversary that never came. I raised it to her photo on the nightstand, whispering, "Justice, my love. You told me once not to be too generous. Tonight I kept that promise." The taste was sharp, almost bitter, but it warmed me as it went down, the flavor of freedom rather than celebration. Over the next few days, I began to arrange the shape of my new life. I met with the banker at Colorado Community Bank, transferring the sale proceeds into accounts Caitlin could never reach. I walked through the senior community where I might one day settle, seeing golf courses and gardens filled with strangers who nodded politely. It felt quiet, safe, a place I could live on my terms. Each morning I found small rituals that steadied me. Coffee at the shop around the corner, where the barista began to remember my order. Walks through the park, watching young families chase their children, feeling neither envy nor regret, only a calm recognition that my role as a father had ended the day Caitlin called me a burden. Love, I realized, could not survive without respect. I still carried Ellen with me. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, her cookbook rested on the shelf, her smile looked out from photographs. These were enough. The rest, the furniture, the trophies, the endless things, could stay behind. What mattered was not the wood and brick, but the memory of why I built them. That memory was mine alone, and no betrayal could strip it from me. Sometimes I imagined Caitlin and Jeremy scrambling in that house as the new owners prepared to take possession. I pictured the fights, the blame, the hollow plans collapsing, but I no longer felt the sting of their words. Their loss was their making, not mine. My lesson was complete. One evening, as the sun set behind the Denver skyline, I sat by the window of my apartment. The city glowed gold, streets alive with people I did not know and futures I did not need to control. I realized then that freedom is not given, it is claimed, and I had claimed mine. Family, I understood now, is not a bond written by blood alone. It is written in loyalty, gratitude, and care. Caitlin had broken that bond long before she realized it. I would always be her father, but from now on, I would no longer be her fool. I raised my glass one more time and spoke softly into the quiet. I am not your burden, I am not your property. I am my own man, and the rest of my life belongs to me. Morning light spilled through the thin curtains of my new apartment, warm and unhurried. I reached up and pulled them fully open, letting the sun flood the small room. The walls were bare, the furniture simple, yet the air felt light. No ticking of the grandfather clock, no weight of memories pressed into the floorboards, only the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat, calm and even. I stood by the window and breathed in this quiet freedom. For so long I had carried the fear of becoming a burden, of being managed like an old ledger line in someone else's account. That fear was gone. I was not a burden. I was not an asset to be traded. I was a man, still alive, still capable, still free to choose. Justice in families does not always come with shouting or revenge. Sometimes it comes in the drawing of clear boundaries, the refusal to be used, the courage to say no. Love cannot survive when it is twisted into entitlement. Respect is the ground on which it must stand. Without it, love collapses. As I closed the curtain halfway again, softening the light, I thought of Ellen's smile and Caitlin's laugh when she was still a child. The memories remained, but they no longer chained me. They were part of me, not possessions for anyone else to claim. That night I opened a small notebook and began to write a new habit, just a few lines. A seed of thought: if one day my daughter comes to me with true remorse, will I open the door? I did not answer the question. Some stories must wait for their ending.